for participating in our first CTE training webinar. This one is entitled Effective Warm-Ups in the CTE Classroom. And to be honest with you, this kind of generated out of our CTE teacher leader meetings. I'm going to turn this video off. Our teacher leaders had suggested that we look at warm-ups and entry events instead of looking at warm-ups the old way in the 90-minute period classes. We wanted to think of new ways that would kind of launch your class and that you would go directly into the warm-ups. Gone are the days when we can spend 20 minutes reviewing a warm-up and going through something to lead into that day's class, or I guess that's the point, is we need warm-ups to be entry events now. There can't be a warm-up that is a separate lesson and then have an entry event that launches you into that day's lesson. So the two warm-ups that you see, I'm going to use this document to guide our discussion. The two warm-ups that you see on your screen, sort of a review and a preview. These are sort of the general warm-ups that I would expect to see. Typically when you walk into any classroom, or if I walked around classrooms throughout your school, these are some of the types of warm-ups that you would generally see. You would see review questions, things that review a keyword or concept, something that you're just doing to check for understanding. You taught something the day before, then there's a follow-up question the next day in there. And so that's the review question. The preview question would be very similar. This is used to pre-assess student knowledge. So you're putting up questions, this type of warm-up where you put a question up just to see what students know about the topic before you start into it. Typically, you may think about keywords or key vocabulary that you know students are going to need, or maybe that they might struggle with, so that you choose those as questions as a preview type activity. Now the next type of warm-up that we're going to talk about is a warm-up that's just based on your formative assessment. So this is hopefully a little bit similar to the review or preview, but instead of it just being based on a guess, you're anticipating that they might need a vocabulary word. You're looking at how you have evaluated your students from the day before and basing questions on that formative assessment. So on the data that you've collected, either the lesson before or from an exit ticket or something like that, you're basing your next day's warm-up on that formative assessment data. So I think those are pretty standard and things that you guys would typically do. I'm going to try to bring out some new ideas and try to think of something that maybe you haven't done. And that's really my goal for today's webinar as well, is to see, is there maybe there's an idea that you get from this that you didn't think about before that hopefully you can take away at least one new thing. This is called a Q focus. It stands for question focus. And a question focus is simply a statement or a picture or some type of visual aid or maybe even a piece of audio or a piece of music that stimulates and engages your students. And the idea of it is to get them to ask as many questions about it as possible. So I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So here where it says, from the New York Times, Libyans suddenly cut short their strange pilgrimage to Israel. So obviously this would be like from a social studies classroom, and this example was from Jay Corrigan, our teacher specialist for professional learning. But so you would just post this up there and you would ask students and you would say, what kind of questions do you have? Don't make any statements or any judgments. Just think about it and ask questions. So you might think, they might say, well, why is the pilgrimage strange? Or what is a pilgrimage? Or why are Libyans going to Israel? How far is Libya to Israel? Why was it cut short? Why was it suddenly cut short? Why is this being published in the New York Times? Why is that important to people in New York? So you get that kind of stimulation of questions, and you get students just asking questions and thinking about the topic. And it's a good way to lead into what you're trying to do for the day. So that's just one example of a cue focus. And I'm sure that there are things that you can think of, whether it be a chart or some type of visual aid that you could then use as a cue focus. And I will send out this Word document here that has a link to more information all about what a cue focus is and how to use them in your classroom. Moving on, another type of warm-up that you can use is an every student response warm-up. I've done warm-ups before where you ask simple yes and no questions. They stand up if the answer is yes, sit down if your answer is no. Of course, with middle school students, you see, well, they're always kind of maybe, and so you tell them to, well, they kind of have to half sit and, kind of bend their knees a little bit. But it gets everybody involved in the warm-up question. You do 5 or 10 of those quick yes or no questions. It gets them all engaged in what's going on that day, and then you can move right into your lesson. These are very quick and easy to do, which is the point of having this webinar in general as well, is so that you can think of good quick warm-ups that get everybody involved and engaged in your topic. That's the purpose of the warm-up anyway, and then use it as an entry event to launch into whatever your lesson is for that day, rather than the warm-up being drawn out 10-15 minutes, and as you know, that can end up being about half your class with the new schedule. 4 corners is where you could have like a multiple choice question, A, B, C, and D. They choose an answer. If your answer is A, you go to this corner. If your answer is B, you go to the other corner of the room. And so you could throw out multiple questions and have students moving around the room. And again, it gets every student to participate. They have to choose one answer and go to a corner of the room. And it's just a quick, easy, formative assessment warm-up. Whiteboards, students have some classes, typically math classes, which you could even borrow from your math teachers, have whiteboards where, again, you're asking a question and they write on their board, and everybody kind of shows their partner what their answer was, that kind of thing. Of course, thumbs up, thumbs down. You ask a question, they kind of answer yes or no by using their thumbs. And then if you want to incorporate technology, those of you that have access to CPS clickers or Promethean clickers that are called active expressions, again, good ways to get every student involved. Another example is just problem solving. And one of the things we want to focus on and what we want to do in CTE is to create creative problem solvers, to get students to think divergently and just out-of-the-box creative thinking. So one of the examples that I've used before is this question, just posing them some type of interesting problem. So I put this picture up there and I'd say, imagine this penny being inside the glass bottle. So there's a glass bottle with a cork in the top, and I don't have a good picture of this, but I'm sure you could find one and bring it in to your classroom. But put the penny inside the bottle, and then simply ask them, how do you get the penny out without pulling the cork out or breaking the bottle? And of course, immediately students will come up with ways that is basically breaking the bottle or pulling the cork out. But eventually students start to think, and they start to think creatively about, well, with enough force, could I push the cork in? They said you could push the cork as long as you did not pull the cork out. Or I could cut the cork somehow and the cork would fall in. Or I could light the cork on fire and the ashes would fall in and then dump the penny out. So there's a variety of responses, and that's what we also want, is we want students to think about questions that would have many different responses, and again, encouraging that divergent thinking and creative problem solving. Another thing would be, list as many ways that you can get out of this room. So through the window, through the ceiling tiles, digging a tunnel, and you get really kind of creative, even sometimes crazy, well, I would use my spoon and dig through the concrete. And it's kind of silly sometimes with middle school students, but that's also what we want. We want them just thinking creatively and thinking of ways to solve problems. So any kind of quick problem solving activities that would encourage creative problem solving is a good warm-up for CTE classes. The next one is an abstract question. And abstract questions are different things that we can use to focus students on skills. So they may not see the connection right away, but you can tie it back around. So I'm going to show you a quick video, and I know you probably can't hear the audio, but this is called Gus versus the pool, and I'm going to start it right there. And I got ahead of myself a little bit, so I apologize for that, but what I would say to students before that I even showed them that is I would give them just a quick poll, and I would say, who will win, Gus or the pool? And you should see the poll on your screen. And so I wouldn't tell them that I'm going to show a video. I wouldn't really tell them anything. I'd just say, who's going to win, Gus or the pool? And that's all the information I would give them. They'd say, well, who's Gus? What are you talking about? What's the pool? And I'd say, just pick, just vote. All you have to do, write down on your warm-up sheet, is it going to be Gus or is it going to be the pool? Who's going to win? All right, so real quickly, I'd have them do that, and then I would show them this video. And I apologize if the video is, again, I apologize if the video, you can't hear the audio, and you can't, it might be a little bit choppy on your screen. I know when we looked at this before, the video was a little bit choppy, but I can send you the link so that you can see it more clearly. So let's just watch Gus as he battles this pool. And this is Gus the dog. I guess his buddy there is taking a drink.
Oh, you wanted to go downhill?
35 years. Yeah. Look, those stealing dirt, stealing wheelbarrows. That's great. I like that. Yeah, my business. Sorry, what you saying, Dan? Oh, no. You just take this down to the car and I'll bring it back out. Saves me a trip, but makes you happy too.
Okay, and eventually you see that Gus did win in the end, and of course by the end the middle school students are, they're cheering, yeah, Gus, go get him, and they're all excited that Gus won. But anytime you show a video clip like this or use an abstract question, the key is then to bring it back around to why you would do that and the purpose of that. And how I used that video was, we know that in CTE sometimes you're going to have work days. You're going to have days where you're not doing any direct instruction. They've already started on a project, they're building a hovercraft or a straw bridge, or they're working on a sewing project, and they just need time to work in class then on their project and get with their groups, that kind of thing. So it was a really good way to take 2 minutes do a very short, quick warm-up to focus on them. And I used to say, I used that video to teach perseverance. And I'd say, you know what, I need everyone in this class today to persevere just like Gus did. I know maybe you're struggling a little bit with your project or whatever the case may be, but we need you to be a problem solver like Gus was. We need you to persevere and to be patient and that kind of thing. So that's how I used abstract questions or even that video clip to focus on certain skills. Next type of warm-up would be just a quick logic puzzle. Again, in CTE, we always want to continue to focus on encouraging creative problem solving and divergent thinking. So you can post a quick logic puzzle as a good warm-up to segue into what you want to do. This is called Petals Around the Rose, if you've ever seen this before. But I'll give you an example. It's to simulate 5 dice or die, and so I'm going to hit roll, and in this case you would say, well, how many petals are around the rose? And you get people to think, and I can tell you, I'll give you kind of cut to the chase, that there are 6 petals around the rose. In this example, there are 6, and I can point them out to you. The rose has a center, and then there would be 1 petal, 2 petals. This one does not have a center, so there's 0 petals around, because it has to be around the rose. This one has 4, 0 and 0. You add them all up, and there would be 6. If I hit roll again, in this case we see 0, 0, 2, 0, and 4, so 6 petals around the rose in this example. And the other link that's on this Word document gives you this information all about how to use petals around the rose in the classroom. And for assessments and extensions, there are different ways to play it, called bears and fishes, and it's the same game just with a different concept, and for extension as well, if you have some higher level students, or if they happen to pick that up very quickly in your class, well, then you can change the game and play it a different way. So just another example of a quick logic puzzle to get them to encourage divergent thinking. Opposite that, though, would be to encourage convergent thinking. This is where you have many items. This is a skill that middle school students tend to struggle with. When you have brainstormed a list of 100 things, and now your group has to rank these items, or narrow down that list, prioritize, or put items into categories. These are valuable skills for middle school students as well. And so even just a quick example I can give of something I used to do would just be to say, here's 15 items, and I'd like you to rank them from 1 to 15 in importance for survival. Or maybe another one to say, you could change it up then and say, rank them in order from 1 to 15 for your survival on the moon, or survival on a deserted island. Okay, so you can mix that up and get them to kind of rank items or make priorities and categories, and that can be helpful as well. And then the last one is just to use higher level questions. The questions that you typically use in a classroom for a warm-up, if you change the verb to be analyze or revise or defend, some of those Bloom's taxonomy things to just increase the rigor, it makes a higher level question to your warm-up. And so that if you are going to use just the standard kind of 1 or 2 questions, try to think of ways that you can change them into higher level questions that are going to spark student thinking and allow you to segue easier and more smoothly right into your lesson for the day. We don't want warm-ups to be seen as a totally separate event, so that you have the warm-up, and then after the warm-up, then you do some sort of entry event to get students into the lesson. We want those to be merged into one. And many of you and throughout CTE buildings do a great job of this, but we certainly have found that there are some teachers that have struggled with that, and it was very appropriate in the old 90-minute schedule to maybe take a little bit of time and say, I really want to review this concept and then move into my next lesson. And we just don't have that luxury anymore with the 47-minute classes. So we have to think of more creative ways to use the warm-up as an entry event and as it helps you to move into the lesson. So again, I know we've been going through a lot of things, and I appreciate your patience as we took a little bit of extra time to make sure everybody could hear, or to try to figure out why some folks couldn't hear. But again, I want to thank you for attending our first CTE training webinar. I will